watches, join Murray Walker and Martin Brundle for a sneak preview of the cars and the drivers.
We hope to have a great season.
I feel confident. How confident, I cannot tell you.
To achieve anything, you have to have high expectations.
Murray and Martin's Formula One special, tonight at 10:40 on ITV.
This is LWT, your weekend ITV. For the past 32 years, my colleagues and I have been introducing those famous chimes of Big Ben. Right now, it's my duty to introduce the final News at 10.
From ITN, News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Clinton breaks his long silence about Monica Lewinsky. After the leak, Lawrence informants forced from their homes. Prayers in school as the E. coli outbreak spreads. What Lasso and Fowler are saying to each other tonight. Turning back the clock to bid farewell to News at 10. Good evening. President Bill Clinton broke his long public silence about Monica Lewinsky tonight to say he wished her well. He said he hadn't seen her on television talking about her affair with him, but what I hope, he said, is that she'll be permitted to get on with her life, and I hope it will be a good life. Mr. Clinton said that for himself, he wanted to be allowed to get on with being president. Our Washington correspondent James Smates reports.
The Monica Lewinsky Roadshow is on the way again, setting out from Los Angeles on the long journey to London, where she plans to promote the book, to give more interviews, to continue raising the money that will pay off her massive legal bills. As the British edition of the book hit the shops this morning, Americans were marveling at how much interest there still is in her. The interview on US television winning the biggest audience of any TV news program ever. It prompted some extraordinary remarks from President Clinton this evening, making clear there are no hard feelings.
What I hope is that she will be permitted to go on with her life. And I hope it'll be a good life. And I hope that all the people who have been hurt by this, including totally innocent people who have massive legal bills, will get the help they need, and I'm determined to do what I can to help them.
And for that reason, he said he had no objection to the money she might make from the story of their affair.
I don't wish anyone ill who was caught up in this, and she paid quite a high price for a long time, and I feel badly for that. So I just hope it works out all right.
The White House thought it had said all it needed to on this subject. That more than a year later, the American people had had enough. It seems they were genuinely surprised by the frenzy of interest there's been here in the last couple of days, hence today's statement. Bill Clinton will be hoping, though, that on this matter, this really is his final word. James Mates, News at 10, Washington.
It's been disclosed that 12 people publicly identified as police informants in the Stephen Lawrence murder report are to be rehoused. It's because they're now in fear for their own or their family's safety. All lived in the Eltham area of southeast London, where Stephen Lawrence lived and died. Reporting from there, here's ITN's Paul Davis.
When it first became clear that the names of informants had been published along with the Macpherson report, the police were asked to assess the risk to those who'd been named. Tonight, it's become clear that that assessment is that this part of South London is no longer safe for many who've given the police help in the past. A dozen families will be leaving Eltham. The first have already been rehoused away from the streets where they're known. The local authority responding to the fears of informants, like this woman who spoke out after she was named last week.
What I'd really like is to move my family away, completely away from this area. I don't want my family to be put at risk because we stood up for justice.
The local MP says rehousing scared people is the right decision.
They're very anxious indeed, and if they've been asking for assistance such as being moved, then they have my full support in that. And it's a question of dealing with their needs as sympathetically as possible. They're in this situation through no fault of their own.
Today, Doreen and Neville Lawrence were allowed to sit in on the start of the disciplinary hearing against one of the officers criticised in the report into their son's murder. Detective Inspector Ben Bullock successfully appealed for the hearing to be put back to June. The Lawrence family were angered by the delay, and a ruling to bar their legal representative from the hearing. Tonight, the Lawrence family's solicitor says he's considering asking for a judicial review to overturn today's decision, enabling him to sit in on the police disciplinary procedure. Paul Davis, News at 10, Eltham, South London.
The number of confirmed cases of E. coli food poisoning in Cumbria rose to 19 today, with 9 more suspected cases. An 18-month-old baby girl and a man of 82 are among those in hospital. Today, some schools in the area were saying prayers for food hygiene. ITN's Sue Saville reports from Cumbria.
Connor Bannard was this evening playing happily like any other 4-year-old, but he only came out of hospital this afternoon after a frightening 48 hours of illness. His parents were shocked to be told it was E. coli.
Very worried, scared, especially when we were seeing somebody getting took to Newcastle just as we arrived at the hospital.
It wasn't until we got to hospital and we were told by the doctors we didn't realise how serious it was at all.
First I just saw to me, and then I told my mum, and then I had to go to the hospital. I was poorly.
Children at Brigham Primary School, where 4 pupils were affected, now have personal hygiene included in their prayers.
Help me to remember to look after myself by keeping clean and remembering to wash my hands all the time. Amen.
Amen. The farmer whose milk is said to be the source of the outbreak isn't saying anything. The hope is that those affected by milk from his farm here will now recover.
I think the chances are pretty good because the infection was spotted quickly. So we just have to watch and pray that the children are in the best possible place, and we hope that they will make a full recovery.
Residents in this area served by the infected farm know the emergency may not yet be over. The E. coli bacterium has an incubation period of between 1 and 6 days, and people can pass on the infection without themselves showing symptoms, which means there could yet be more cases over the weekend. Sue Saville, News at 10, Cockermouth in Cumbria.
As we heard in that report, the source of the outbreak is believed to be a dairy farm, where the pasteurization process went wrong. Whatever the cause, the outbreak is a reminder of just how dangerous everyday items of food can be if they're infected with this strain of E. coli. Our medical editor Lawrence McGuinty reports.
E. coli is a bug that lives in the gut of cattle. Most strains are harmless to cows and humans, but since the 1980s a new strain has emerged called 0157, which can be deadly. All strains can occur in milk. That's why milk is pasteurized. The bacteria are destroyed by being heated to high temperatures. But not all milk is pasteurized, and raw milk carries a risk of infection. But tonight, the government's chief medical officer told me unpasteurized milk will still be on sale to give consumers a choice.
The government recently carried out a consultation exercise on whether raw milk should continue to be sold, and the proposal is that the regulations will be tightened up and there'll be stronger labelling on packets so that people will still have a choice about whether or not to drink raw milk.
Most milk produced in this country is processed at big dairies, but not all. There are more than 32,000 dairy farms in the UK, and just over 2,000 of them, like the farm in Cumbria, pasteurise their own milk. We consume more than 6.5 billion litres every year, and 143 million litres is farm pasteurised.
Currently, there are about 1,000 cases a year of food poisoning caused by this virulent strain of E. coli. A decade ago, there were less than 100 a year. So although this particular outbreak in Cumbria seems to be under control, the Department of Health here is stressing that consumers still need to be careful about hygiene. Lawrence McGuinty, News at 10 at the Department of Health.
The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook insisted today that he had nothing to apologise for over 3 reports leaked to him from the Commons Foreign Affairs Select Committee. The Conservatives have accused him of a grave abuse of Parliament and called for his resignation. Mr. Cook, who met the Russian Prime Minister Primakov in Russia today, said receiving the reports wasn't a crime and he hadn't acted on them in any way. Joining me now from Westminster is our political editor, Michael Brunson. Michael, is this a serious row?
It's serious, but I don't think Mr. Cook's job is at risk. In fact, it now really all becomes grist for the Commons Standards Committee mill. They'll have a look at it all. but I have to say it doesn't, in the long term, do much, in my view, for any claim Mr. Cook may have of being a great Foreign Secretary.
Mike, as we've done so many times on News at 10 over the years, look ahead for us to next week and the budget.
Well, yes, after 31 years, Trevor, there's a certain moisture in my eye tonight, I must admit, reporting for the programme. But yes, you're right, this is budget speculation weekend. And so, if you like, here's my list. I think it's going to be a very important budget for the environment. There are some measures coming up that we know about. The £50 reduction in car tax for some of the smaller engine cars now and for cleaner engines in the future. I think we're going to see the start of using energy taxes within industry to get energy used more efficiently in industry. And in addition, I think we're going to see some very important measures to help lower and middle income families. 10p starting rate of tax, quite a hefty hike in child benefit, I think, not to be taxed yet, but hints that that may come. But much more about all this at 6:30 on Monday, when you and I no doubt will be talking again, and of course on Budget Day on Tuesday.
Michael Brunson, thank you. Still to come on News at 10, today's other main news and sport. The banana trade war, America raises the stakes tonight. Remembering Lord Denning, the People's Judge, who died today, age 100. Graham Lasso gets the ball rolling in patching up the row with Robbie Fowler. And remember this.
Almost the first person we saw was a little
and
girl.
This.
It was a day of tragedy.
And this.
The moment Berliners have waited 28 years for.
Look back with us at just a few of the best moments of News at 10's 32-year run.
Some people will naturally put themselves out for others. Which is why one day, we hope that Rebecca's favorite job will be with the world's favorite airline.
Orange are the only network to give talk plan customers both 1 year's free insurance and 24-hour replacement, should they lose their phone. Orange, the network that performs.
If you're talking safety, size can make all the difference. Just 10 centimeters travel in the pyrotechnic pretensioners helps reduce pressure across the thorax by 33% in the event of an impact.
Nothing. Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing.
The Halifax 10-minute tax-free savings check. Drop in and we'll show you how to pay nothing in tax on your savings.
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing?
The Halifax 10-minute tax-free savings check. There's really nothing to it.
When the AA decided to set up an insurance telesales division, when they pledged to check from their list of leading insurance companies rigorously to provide people with low-cost insurance without cheapening their policy, when they sat down and decided on all of these things, I was in that room. I was in that room. And I will fight until my last working day to uphold those decisions.
AA Insurance, 0800 444 777.
Bring your mobile number to the network that performs. Call 0800 80 1080.
0% finance, free insurance, and a lot of room. The new Clio from Renault. Size matters.
Welcome back. Neither side of the banana trade war was giving any ground today. It's the United States against Britain and the EU. Today, the American ambassador in London said it wasn't really about bananas or the cashmere trade, now threatened by punitive American duties, but about playing by the trade rules. Our diplomatic editor, Robert Moore, reports.
The American ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Office to be told for the second time in 24 hours that US actions were unacceptable and that a long-running dispute over bananas could lead to a major trade confrontation. And in Washington, President Clinton responded tonight, saying that Europe should accept previous rulings.
But we cannot maintain an open trading system, which I am convinced is essential for global prosperity, unless we also have rules that are abided by. Just twice since I've been president, we've won this case in the EU. I think we've won it 4 times over the last 10 years. It has gone on. Somehow the rules have to work.
The Americans complain the European Union favour banana imports from their own former colonies in the Caribbean, discriminating against the plantations in South America run by large US companies. But Britain says the US decision to impose trade sanctions prejudges international arbitration, and the EU warns that American actions could destroy the vulnerable economies of Caribbean islands.
We're talking about Caribbean islands, which can't do anything else except grow bananas. We're talking about the United States where no bananas are grown in continental United States. And we're talking about islands which, if they are not allowed to grow bananas, in fact, will probably become drug havens.
The dispute began in September 1995, when the US first complained about the EU policy that offers some protection to Caribbean banana growers. In September 1997, the World Trade Organization ruled for the second time against the European Union. At the start of this year, the EU did introduce minor changes. But 2 days ago, America brought things to a head by imposing 100% tariffs on 14 unrelated European products. Using exceptionally blunt language, diplomats here at the Foreign Office had described the American actions as illegal and outrageous. And amid such recriminations tonight, all sides acknowledge that a dispute over bananas could rapidly escalate into a major transatlantic trade war. Robert Moore, News at 10, at the Foreign Office.
Lord Denning, one of the best known and most controversial judges of the century, died in his sleep this morning. He was 100 years old. Fellow lawyers say he was a great judge, but he was also one the public warmed to, not least because he spoke a language everyone could understand. ITN's Joe Andrews reports in part from the very courtroom where Lord Denning sat.
Tom Denning was no ordinary judge, but unusually he came from an ordinary background. The son of a draper from Whitchurch in Hampshire, he spent his life in passionate defence of the individual. He spoke a language everyone could understand and believed, above all, in justice.
There always has to be the tendency, has been, between those who go by the letter and those, as I would prefer, to go by the spirit of, and to seek to do justice as far as we can.
In tribute to him today, ITN cameras were allowed for the first time ever into the courtroom he dominated for nearly 40 years. It was from this seat that he altered the face of English law.
He changed a lot of judicial attitudes. You couldn't afford more than one Denning a century, but he was absolutely essential.
He was famous because of his inquiry into the Profumo affair, but his great contribution was in developing legal concepts like judicial review, the right to challenge the state's decisions, and the duty of care owed by all organisations to the public.
He was a judge at the cutting edge of judicial inventiveness. Therefore, he was bound to be controversial. But when you look at the balance sheet of Lord Denning, my goodness me, the credit side is much higher than the debit side.
This is where Lord Denning spent most of his working life, the Royal Courts of Justice in central London. He'll not be seen here again, but his memory lives on in the laws that he helped to shape and change. And that, above all, was the legacy he wanted. Joe Andrews, News at 10, inside the High Court.
Lord Denning, who died today. The families of 20 people killed in Italy last year when an American Marines jet cut through ski lift cables expressed their fury today that the pilot was acquitted of all charges. Captain Richard Ashby has apologized to the victims' families and said his thoughts were with them and his prayers were with them. James Archer, son of the millionaire author Lord Archer, was today sacked from the Citibank Credit Suisse First Boston. He and 2 colleagues were dismissed following an investigation into share dealing. The England football internationals Graham Lasseau and Robbie Fowler both apologised today for their extraordinary running battle on the field last Saturday. Lasseau of Chelsea wrote a letter of apology saying he shouldn't have elbowed the Liverpool player. Fowler responded tonight with a statement in which he said Lasseau might have misunderstood his gestures. Our sports correspondent Graham Miller reports.
The England colleagues were involved in a running battle throughout the game at Stamford Bridge, but it was Lasseau who was caught on television elbowing Robbie Fowler to the floor. Lasseau was reacting to personal gestures made by Fowler. He called for the match officials to intervene, but was booked by referee Paul Durkin, who hadn't seen the Fowler incident. But after studying the video, the FA charged both players with misconduct. Tonight, both said sorry, Lasseau first. People in all walks of life occasionally face provocation and deal with it. I realise I have to deal with it in a more mature manner. Fowler followed, saying, Graham may have misinterpreted my actions, which were not intended to cause any offence. I'd like to think that this is the end of the matter. Lasseau will be under the microscope on Sunday when Chelsea face Manchester United for a place in the semi-finals of the FA Cup. They warmed up for the tie with victory in the Cup Winners' Cup last night against Vålerenga. But United are keeping their feet on the ground for Chelsea despite the thrilling victory against Inter Milan, which puts them on the verge of the European Cup semi-finals.
They're a very good side. They've had an outstanding season. They're the best side we've played this year. And I think it could be a fantastic game.
So a big footballing test for Lasseau on Sunday. He and Fowler will now be hoping their apologies help their case at the FA. Graham Miller, News at 10.
In athletics, Britain's Colin Jackson has won a gold medal in the 60 metres hurdles of the World Indoor Championships. Jackson, fourth lane from the bottom, set a new championship record of 7.38 seconds. He only just made it. The result had to be confirmed by a photograph. The main headlines again. President Clinton has broken his long silence over Monica Lewinsky and wished her a good life in the future. And 12 people named as informers in the Stephen Lawrence report have asked to be moved from the estate where they live, close to the murder scene. Now, a reminder, just in case you needed one, that this is the last News at 10, and a reminder about our new programmes, which begin next week. There'll be a new look to our lunchtime news. John Suchet will join Julia Somerville to present the programme at its regular time of 12:30. And then you can join me for our new half-hour ITV Evening News. That'll be at 6:30. And the new ITV Nightly News will be at 11 o'clock, presented by Dermot Murnahan. That's the new ITN News on ITV, beginning Monday. But to end this last News at 10, we're looking back, lumps in our throats, at the programme's history, its place in the development of television news, and the history it's brought to our screens through the years. News at 10 was born on the 3rd of July in 1967. ITN's Norman Rees, who's been here almost from the beginning, recalls some of the events and the faces which have made this programme what it's been.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, up.
We have a liftoff.
It was launched in the decade that landed man on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For 32 years, News at 10 has brought the nation the world's defining images.
It dropped 4 canisters of napalm on those civilians. Almost the first person we saw was a little girl aged about 9 running up the road.
It was a day of tragedy, but I vouch it was a day of extraordinary heroism and selflessness by every man who witnessed it.
They were to be buried in the Republican plot, in the same grave. The silence turned to mayhem.
The moment Berliners have waited 28 years for.
3 have flown over our heads, all heading for their targets, and I think there's some more coming in over here.
Right from the start, the programme looked different. There were 2 newscasters. News at 10 presenters soon became household names. But at the beginning, there were many who predicted the half-hour bulletin would never succeed.
So sure were the ITV network bosses that News at 10 would fail, that they actually scheduled it for 13 weeks back in 1967. I think they reasoned that there simply wouldn't be an appetite for half an hour of news at 10 o'clock at night. Happily, they were wrong, because after just 10 weeks, we had a regular audience of 10 million people. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Early reports like these from Biafra were on film in black and white. Colour film was to follow.
10 minutes later, and the Biafrans are having trouble getting their troops to advance from their forward positions. Most of their bullets are going into the ground ahead. The very first paratroopers are now hitting Cyprus soil. Over there, Alan. The aircraft came in waves at 5-minute intervals with 60 paratroopers for each aircraft.
Those early reports are stored here in ITN's archives, mile upon mile of historical film footage. But the big breakthrough for News at 10 came with the introduction of lightweight electronic cameras, cameras that could be linked with another invention, portable satellite dishes. Events could now be covered live anywhere in the world. News at 10 flew a dish to the Great Wall of China for the visit of the Queen.
It was, of course, an occasion, and the Queen, more than most of us, has a sense of occasion.
Always the search for exclusive coverage. News at 10 at Dawson's Field when Palestinian terrorists blew up 3 hijacked planes. Michael Brunson's first interview with Maggie Thatcher after her resignation. Trevor MacDonald meeting Saddam Hussein.
A deliberate and sustained assault on the old city.
Paul Davis, the only reporter at the siege of Dubrovnik. Photo news, images and words that have made history over the last 3 decades.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Some pictures with the force to shake the world's conscience.
These infants, too young to know what's happening to them, are the lost children of Goma.
We were not prepared for what we saw and heard there.
Award-winning coverage from reporters and camera crews on location telling the story as they saw it.
That was the building block for News at 10. The half hour gave us a chance to let stories breathe. And the whole idea was that our cameramen, some of the best in the world, would show you on location what the place looked like. And the presence of the reporter there gave you a feeling of what it was like to be there.
If ever you doubted the destructive, primeval power of nature, then have a look at this. This was once a pineapple plantation. You can still see ruined fruit lying everywhere. But what happened here is that vegetation from miles upstream was smashed by the floodwaters and swept down and dumped here.
A final handshake and a wish for the best of British luck. If everything goes well and according to plan from now on, Fiennes will not come face to face with another human being for 70 days.
Many Israelis and Palestinians had hoped that such scenes as these were a thing of the past. But now, after 2 days of violence throughout the West Bank, no one knows where this is leading. And no one knows if Yasser Arafat is still in control.
News is an unending resource, and history suggests the next 32 years will provide stories just as significant as the last 32. ITN will still be here to cover them. It's just that the deadlines will change as News at 10 bows out.
The general mood, I think, overwhelmingly is pride, corporate pride at what ITN has achieved by producing the top primetime news for over 30 years, and individual pride and memories amongst those who were involved. But also, you know, there's optimism, there's determination, there's commitment to pass the baton on, that when that news schedule starts on Monday, it'll have all that was best about News at 10 and take it forward in a new, creative, innovative way. So News at 10 is not exactly dead, it lives on in perhaps an even more exciting form.
And that handover of tradition will include the and finales. Skateboarding dogs and water skiing squirrels will still have their place.
And that's the news tonight.
From all of us here on the News at 10 team,
Good night. A very good night to you.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
And before we say goodnight, a reminder that ITN will continue to report the top national and international stories from around the world, as we've always done. Stories seen through the eyes of the best-known names and faces in British television journalism. For me, that begins with the ITV Evening News at 6:30 on Monday. But now it's time to say, on behalf of all my colleagues here at ITN, it's time to say farewell to this program and to thank the millions of you who have watched us and who have said so many nice things about what we do. So finally, it's goodbye, News at 10. And from all of us here, good night.
Hello, good evening. It's been a cold day everywhere, with eastern England bearing the brunt of a thoroughly wet day. Things should slowly improve there. And for all of the weekend, I'm afraid it's a cold one ahead with some wintry showers. But the good news is we are expecting milder weather to push up from the southwest early next week, along with some cloud and rain. Our Met Office satellite sequence shows clouds spiralling around the centre of a low out in the North Sea. They're feeding showers down from the north, and then thicker areas of cloud threatening eastern parts there, with rain, sleet and snow tonight as well as tomorrow night. So back to the here and now, and we continue with scattered wintry